Today, the procrastination equation. That's what we're focusing on. And so I've got this little strategy I've been using for many years now. Whenever it comes to something like a book, or when I was more maybe in the corporate world, when there was a paper or something that we had to get up on speed quickly, or even in my own world right now, the stuff outside my coaching business, if I'm looking at information in a domain, when maybe you've got a bunch of research you've got to read, and you've got to get up to speed on it relatively quickly, and you want to stick a lot of it in your head. So I'm going to share that process with you today. How does this work? There's 3 steps. You prime yourself. Now, everyone here has heard me talk about priming a lot. When we prime ourselves, we raise our interest levels. We remember more of what we pay attention to. That affects the decisions we make and the actions that we take. So priming is just crucial to everything that we do. We're going to start with priming. Before you even read this book, we're going to do some priming. Now, because I have read it, I'm going to do a little bit more priming than you will usually be able to do yourself. But we're going to start with priming. I'm going to bring that to life, and I'm going to show you how that works. That's really going to be the main thing we'll do today, because then after today, you're going to go read the book. And then once you read the book, I'm going to prep you with some retrieval strategies. Because if you want to remember more of what you read or watch or listen to, you want to prime, first of all. Then you want to consume, whether that's read, watch, or listen. And then you want to retrieve. Really, it's as simple as that. And if you want to make things stick, you then want to space out that retrieval. We use that kind of space retrieval practice method. And you'll find that if you do this, that if you choose to, you can create a little library in your brain where you have a book which you can refer back to. So we're going to start with this one today, the Procrastination Equation, Dr. Piers Steele. So let's do the memorizing. I'm going to give you the pictures here just for speed. But obviously, when you do this yourself, you'll have to make up your own. So here goes. We're going to start with the Russian bar. So if everyone can see the Russian bar here, let's imagine that there was a portrait, a big portrait, right in front of the Russian bar. So that portrait can be anything you like. So just imagine that in your mind. Okay, just to visualize it, imagine it, there's a portrait there, anything you want. Now let's move over to Ronnie Scott's, and let's look at the door here. You see where the sign is over here? And you see this door to Ronnie Scott's, it's got upstairs just there. Sitting on the steps is Einstein. So Einstein is sitting on the steps here. We just got Einstein, and actually he's got lots of research, maybe on this orange stand here. There's lots of research, and then we've got Einstein. Moving along, we can see here the entrance to Ronnie Scott's, and we've got a little ramp here as well. Let's imagine along this ramp are lots of wires. There's lots of wires wrapped around that ramp. And then standing in front of the door is a horse with this rider. So maybe it's a big horse with this rider. I don't know what they're doing in Ronnie Scott's. They are just there. And then beneath their feet are all those wires on the ramp. Moving along, we're going to move up now, actually. And you see where this Ronnie Scott sign is up here. Just give me a nod so you can see that one. I think you can see my cursor. Up here, we're going to imagine a very large mobile phone on top of this Ronnie Scott's sign, a large mobile phone. Let's move along. On the left here, there's a bar called Lobos. It might actually be, no, I think it's a tapas bar here, Lobos. On the street here, let's imagine a giant. And this giant is in tears, suffering, and they're holding a purse. So you've got a giant in tears, suffering, holding a purse. There we go. We're going to go over to the other side of the street now. There's I think this is a Chinese restaurant here, I remember. No, it's the Chamber of Commerce. There it is. It tells me it's the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Here, that's actually quite fitting. There's a big business, and there's lots of money coming out of that business. In fact, it's all flowing out the windows. Chinese Chamber of Commerce, a big building, money flowing out the windows. And now we're going to move around to the blue doors, the stage doors of the Prince Edward Theatre. And right in the middle there, a very strange image, there's a large brain. There's a large brain. There's 2 hemispheres of a brain right there. And then we go to Little Italy, and a little Italian coffee shop. And you can see here, there is a gigantic love heart. a gigantic love heart on Little Italy. And then when we go around here, see this clock? I want you to imagine the hands of the clock spinning round very quickly on Bar Italia up there. Hands of the clock spinning around, super high speed in good time. And then we're going to go around to the red car. And I don't know why I've seen this picture. This might be the best one. Imagine someone's banging a hammer on the red car. Someone's banging a hammer on top of the red car. And then we go over to, there's the deli brasserie there. And you can see steps going from the pavement all the way up to the roof. Steps from the pavement to the roof. Right, I'm going to do that one more time, just really quickly. So imagine you've got a portrait in the Russian bar. You've got Einstein beside the door here with his research paper. You've got a horse and a rider coming down the ramp, which has got lots of wires on it. On the sign up here, you've got a mobile phone. There's a giant suffering and crying with these parts outside Lobots. The Chinese Chamber of Commerce, there's a big business building. There's lots of money flowing out. On the stage door to the Prince Edward, there's a big brain, the left and the right hemisphere. Little Italy, there's a gigantic love heart. On the clock, the hands of the clock are spinning around super quickly. The red car is being banged with a hammer, and then the steps going from the pavement all the way up to the top of the roof outside the deli brasserie. Okay. Now, actually, I reckon I could switch off this screen, and just by memory, you'd have the palace in your mind plus the items. What I'm going to do, just to help us along, I'm going to leave this on the screen for, let's say, 30 seconds, and I want you to write down, you could say it out loud, but ideally write this down. What are the images on each of the items? In fact, if we guide it together, so what's on the Russian bar? Write that down for yourself. So what do you see on the Russian bar? Write that down. I'll give you a couple of seconds for each one. And if you get stuck, just ask yourself, well, what could it be? Now let's go to the next image. So you've got outside Ronnie Scott's, outside the door, sitting on the steps. Who do you see and what are they holding? Write that down for yourself. What do you see and what are they holding? Next, the Ronnie Scott's entrance. What can you see in the doorway and then what is along the ramp? What do you see in the doorway? What's along the ramp? Take a moment. Write it down. Next, let's move upwards to the Ronnie Scott sign. What do you see on the Ronnie Scott sign? What else is up there? What else is up there? Let's move along. And now we're outside Lobots. What do you see outside Lobots? What is happening there? Again, just write that down for yourself. Picture it in your mind, write down what, it's not about being word perfect here. It's just a sense of what the image is, because we're going to add some meaning to this in a moment. Let's move across the street. You've got the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Again, what do you see there? What is happening? Write that down. Next, you might be ahead of me already. What is outside the Prince Edward stage door? Where these blue doors are, what can you see? What can you see outside the blue doors? And let's move along to Little Italy. What is happening outside Little Italy? What do you see? What do you observe? And then let's look at the Bar Italia clock. What is happening to that clock? Again, what do you see? Write down, or in, as they say in catchphrase, say the red car. What's happening to the red car? Again, write it down. And then finally, what do you see outside from the pavement to the roof outside the deli brasserie? Write that down for yourself. Okay. Caleb, you got 11.
I did.
Fantastic. Can you do me a favor? Can everyone just check this off themselves? I will navigate us around. Can you just out loud, don't look at what you've written down, just out loud, tell me what the images are, starting from the Russian bar. Just tell me.
Yeah, so the Russian bar is a portrait.
Yeah.
Ronnie Scott has Albert Einstein sitting on the steps looking at research on the sign.
Yeah.
There's wires wrapped around the steps going up to a horse on his rider.
Perfect.
There's a phone. I don't know why I said iPhone. I'm an iPhone user. On top of the sign right there.
So was mine. So there you go.
Yeah, it's definitely an iPhone for sure.
Yeah.
And in front of that restaurant over there, Lowe's, I think is what it
Yeah.
is. There's a giant holding a purse crying.
Perfect.
Or very upset. The building across the street, the commerce has money flowing out of the windows in the building.
Yeah.
The blue doors have two hemispheres of a brain. There's a big
Yeah.
brain right there.
Yeah.
Little Italy has a gigantic heart, huge heart over the whole restaurant.
Perfect.
The clock is spinning really fast.
Yeah.
The car has someone on top banging a hammer.
Yeah.
And the last building is stairs going from the street to the ceiling.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well done. One, we're priming our brains. We want to get more interested in the material before we jump in, create a little bit of anticipation and curiosity around it. But more than that, we're creating a map. We're creating a map in our mind so that after we read the book, we can navigate through it in our head. Right? And we can ask ourselves, oh, what do I naturally remember? So I'm just going to tell you what the table of contents is, and then I'm going to show you it, and I'm going to have you spend a little bit of time connecting the images to the table of contents. Now, here's what I'm going to say with this. It doesn't have to be word perfect. We're not learning lines here. So if you don't get word perfect on the chapter, that does not matter. You just want to get a sense of, oh, what do I think that means? Oh, it's something about an equation, the procrastination equation. So if I look at the Russian bar, there's a portrait. So this is about the portrait of a procrastinator. And I'll tell you a little bit about, I've read this book. So what I naturally remember, and it's not about remembering the entire book, it's like, what were the salient points for you? What stood out for you? And what I particularly remember about this chapter is that one, there's an assessment, which basically says, are you a procrastinator or not? And that's quite fun. Go take the assessment. Awesome. Or he's got one online which goes into a lot more depth if you want to spend a bit more time there. I tend to find that if you're a procrastinator, you know it already, but taking an assessment is always a bit of fun. He talks a lot about impulsivity in that first chapter, and really about how impulsivity is the biggest culprit when it comes to procrastination. And when we look at the equation, we can see how that kind of fits together. And then, sorry, I'm laughing because I've got a few more pictures that I put down for myself. Because when I read, I tend to have a few pictures that I put around. I can see Mary Poppins right now beside the equator. It just makes me laugh. It's the scale of perfectionism. And so he talks about the scale of perfectionism. And there was a lot of anecdotal evidence that says, listen, if you're a perfectionist, you're most likely a procrastinator, but actually that's not true. And so that really stood out for me in that first chapter, i.e. that if you're a procrastinator, if you're a perfectionist, you're less likely to be a procrastinator. Now, I know some of you might be both because we've talked, but you're actually less likely. So that's quite interesting. You might take longer to do things if you're a perfectionist. Yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're a procrastinator. In fact, when you're a perfectionist, you tend to go get help for something or seek things out or do some self-development. If you're a procrastinator, you might not get round to it. So most of this stuff is just natural memory. I've got 3 pictures here that kind of sum it up. That's the key points. Then you look at Einstein here. Now, the book is like a lot of books. There's usually a vehicle which makes the book memorable. The vehicle used in this particular book are 3 people. And so I see Einstein there, and that's about the procrastination equation. It's the title of the book, right? So you can tell, oh, that's what the book's all about, right? It's the procrastination equation. I'm not going to go into detail on that one yet, because I'm going to do a little activity with you in a minute. I'll just tell you titles. The next one is about how we're wired for procrastination. So this is the wires there. I'll tell you what the horse means later in a bit. Then you've got a mobile phone. And as you might guess, mobile phones are a big distraction. It's about procrastinations. All of the things in a modern world which end up being these procrastinations. And then outside Lobos, we can see the giant here. I don't know why I put a giant. Like, this is just my head. But it's about the personal price of procrastination. So that purse there reminded me of price. And the giant is suffering because when I first started reading that chapter, I'm going to be honest with you, I was a little bit turned off, the book started to turn me off a little bit. But I realized it wasn't the book, it was actually me and some of my own realizations about that chapter. And so that was a bit of that hit me hard.
How did you make that connection? What went through your mind in that moment where you're like, oh, this is actually just me? What questions did you ask yourself?
The question that I ask myself is, whenever I judge something, because I'm a coach, whenever I judge something, I know that's usually something to do with me and how I'm perceiving things. So it's a signal. So this is a pattern I recognize over the years, more about judgment and the judgments I was making, because I started making judgments about the author. But some of it was the language, and then I realized, because he talks about these 12 different domains, I thought, no, this is the pictures I'm seeing in my head about that stuff. And actually, some of it I mismatched, but some of it, his life mirrors a lot of the stuff that I experienced in my own life. I thought, oh, okay. And so you'll find that, and this is why there's a mode to reading that I use, which is whenever I read, I never try to remember. I always try to create. So whenever I'm reading, and this is a technique, I call it creative reading. Whenever I read, I'm looking to create and connect and think about stuff rather than trying to remember what is there. This is a strategy I've used as an actor, learning lines, because I know that will actually help me do the thing of learning quicker. So it's a little counterintuitive, but that's what happens. The next
Do you
chapter,
just the first thing that comes in your mind? Sorry to
yeah,
stop you there, but
yeah,
I
with
love that.
creative reading, I'll let my mind throw out pictures, and sometimes it's just a memory of something that happened that I'm reading in the book. I like to think of it like when you read a fictional book and you get absorbed into the story and you get drawn along. You're not trying to remember it, but you remember loads. So this is exactly the same. Take something that's factual, but read it as it was fiction. Go find the narrative, get curious, get playful, get excited with it, create. Relate it back to yourself. Things just become memorable. There's no specific, for everyone who knows the techniques that I use around visual cues, there might be a little bit of that happening, the odd few pictures that pop up, but a lot of it is natural memory, natural connections, and just meaning. Okay, I'm probably going into more detail than I would expected, but there you go. Ask questions as we go, because this is why I'm doing this, because hopefully there's insights that come up, and when you read the book yourself, you'll find your own insights. The Chamber of Commerce, this was about, that you can see over there, is the economic cost of procrastination. Now, what I find really interesting, if I just swing back here, is the first two chapters set up, are you a procrastinator? And the second one, I didn't tell you this, they tell a story. It's like expectant Eddie. They've got value Valerie, impulsive Tom. They have these three characters that he uses to describe the procrastination equation. And later in the book, he comes back to it. And so it's a really good mnemonic to let you understand what type of procrastinator are you. Chapter 1, are you a procrastinator? Chapter 2, the procrastination equation, what's your procrastination profile? So again, as humans, we need these assessment type things, right? We don't tend to procrastinate so much around them. And you don't need to take the assessment, because I guarantee when you read it, you will immediately know which one you are. I knew what one I was straight away. Like, oh, okay, I know which one I am. I can see that. Moving on. The reason I'm back here is because the next 4 chapters, which is about wired for procrastination, procrastinations in the modern world, essentially, the personal price of procrastination, and the economic cost. These 4 chapters, in my mind, what they're really doing is building significant pain and leverage. Like, they let you understand why we procrastinate. It's evolution. It's wired in. There's the environment. We don't stand a chance. We're creatures of distraction. And then at the same time, they really tap it into, and this is what the chapter on the personal cost of procrastination, that hit me harder, because I get drawn into the emotion of these things whenever I read, which is why it's memorable. But I started to feel the pain in there and the recognition of it. So that makes it memorable. But really what's happening here as a mechanism, in my mind, is that he's setting the book up, getting you ready for change. So he's going, hey, this is who you are. This is what profile you are. This is how procrastination works. This is how it's affecting and impacting your life. And then the magic, the reveal happens, and we get the Prince Edward Theatre, and there's a brain there. A little bit closer. There's a brain there, and then we get into the brain, which is anyone who's heard me talk about the left and right hemispheres of the brain and how each different side of the brain has a preference. Left, optimism, the right hemisphere, pessimism. This is about that. It's about optimizing optimism. Because if you are a procrastinator, chances are you're way more pessimistic. Not always. You can also be optimistic, and it looks at the different profiles of procrastination. You can be overconfident and procrastinate, but you can also do the other thing. So then we really get into strategies here. Little Italy, this is love it or leave it. And this is when we get into, so if I go back to Blue Door, this is about expectancy. And this is part of the procrastination equation, which I'll show you in a moment. But expectancy is one ingredient to the procrastination equation. Do you expect things to work out? Do you expect things to fail? If you expect things to fail, you're going to procrastinate. If you're overconfident and think things are going to work out great, and then they don't, then that can also have a negative effect because you can leave things to the very last minute. And so that can be a problem. Love it or leave it, outside Little Italy, this chapter, is about value. This is the second ingredient in the procrastination equation. Imagine this. Think about your work. Have you ever engaged in a piece of work where you ask yourself, what is the point of this? There's zero value in me doing this. Who's had this experience? Anyone? Why am I doing this? This is a waste of time. And so maybe you procrastinate around that because maybe you think, you know what, it's just going to go away. No one's going to ask anyway. You kind of leave it. And you just let it happen. But if you see the value in something, you're much more likely to do it. And so it starts to look at the value in the specific techniques you can do to make that work. And then the next chapter goes into detail about, this is called In Good Time. This is the clock, In Good Time. And it looks at impulsiveness and delay. So it looks at impulsiveness and delay. And actually, as I said at the beginning, impulsiveness is the biggest culprit when it comes to procrastination. And so within these three chapters, Optimize and Optimism, Love It or Leave It, and In Good Time, we essentially have about, I think it's 12 techniques. There's 12 separate techniques that you can use. And then the red car, we've got a hammer banging off it. And this is the chapter, Making It Work. And actually what we do here is it joins together the three people, which was with Einstein, Eddie, Valerie, and Tom. And it shows them how, if they put these techniques into practice, how it would have changed their life for the better. And so it takes it full circle. And the last things are, when you see the steps beside the deli, this chapter is all about the procrastination steps, which it breaks down. First of all, these are the images you've already memorized. So these images are in your head. Right, everyone's got these. So now what you do is, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes on the clock to do this for yourself right now, because if you don't do this part, then none of this works. And obviously I've talked quite a lot. When you do this for yourself, it'll take you like 5 minutes. And so what you're going to do is you're going to see the picture of the portrait. But what you're going to say to yourself is, oh, what that means is a portrait of a procrastinator. You're going to see Einstein on the steps. And what you're going to say to yourself is, oh, I get it. That means he likes equations. So that's the procrastination equation. Don't worry about the second half of the thing. Like, don't worry about this right now. You're going to look at the wires and you're going to say, oh, that's about wired for procrastination. You're going to look at the mobile phone and say, that's about procrastinations. You look at the giant, and what you say out loud to yourself is, that's the personal price of procrastination. Here's the thing. If you see that image and you don't say it out loud, you're not creating a memory. You're not creating like a neuronal connection that gets wired up. That's why I suggest you say this out loud. It's a technique I use with actors, kind of really lay in lines. Then you've got the economic cost of procrastination. So that's outside the Chinese embassy there. And then you've got the brain, which is optimizing optimism. Say that out loud, etc., etc. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. So don't take too long in this. Just see the picture, say it aloud. Off you go. Okay, great. So imagine that you've done this for yourself. It's probably taken you, when you first start this, maybe 5 minutes. So when you do this for yourself, you read the table of contents, you turn those table of contents into simple pictures, nothing complex, and then you put those pictures on the memory pads as we've done, and then you see the image and you see the actual title, the chapter out loud. It doesn't have to be word perfect. You just have to get the gist of it. So perfection is not required here. But now what you've got in your mind is a map. So now when you read this book and you think about that image and you bring stuff to life, once you finish reading the book, you can go back and navigate the book in your mind. Now, what's actually happening here, this mind map acts as a retrieval tool for you to go in deep and retrieve information, which will naturally make things stick. But we're not finished. Everyone's had a life so far. You've had a ton of experience. A lot of the stuff that you read in this book, you will recognize. I know you will. It will be very familiar to you. And there's going to be the odd thing that which may be going to go, oh, that's new. That's interesting. So here's what we do when we prime. In your mind, you're going to navigate the palette. So you go to your steps and you go, oh, portrait of a procrastinator. Here's a question I want you to ask about each chapter. And I've given you a little bit already at the beginning, so I teased that in so you didn't start with nothing. But even if you were doing this for yourself, you go, what do I think it's about? And then you answer it. Portrait of a procrastinator, it's probably about people who procrastinate. What else could be in there? How might that be useful to me? And you're asking questions to guess what you think's inside. Why is this useful? When you guess what you think it is, when you actually read it, you're going to do two things. You're going to match and go, oh, I guess that is exactly what I thought. Or you're going to mismatch. Oh, I didn't expect that. Oh, I don't even know if I agree with that. That's not what I thought. Really? And now you do this thing. So now it becomes more memorable. Make sense? So 2 minutes, and you're going to do this in your head now. Now you're going to navigate around. Don't spend too long. Spend about 5-10 seconds on each one. What do you think it is? Answer the question. Say it out loud. Talk to yourself. You don't need to write this down. You can write it down if you want. I'll let you choose. 2 minutes. Off you go. So that's priming. If you break that down, you've looked at the book, you haven't read it, you looked at the table of contents, you turn it into images, you lay the images down on memory palettes, you then say the chapter out loud while you think about the picture, that connects it up, and then you ask yourself, you play the guessing game, oh, what do I think each chapter is about? Like in reality, that takes about 10 minutes. Has anyone read the book already, by the way? Anyone read the book?
You told us not to.
Sorry, Caleb.
You told us not to.
I did tell you not to. Yeah. Yeah. I just come under
But
before.
you set us up. You set us
Yeah,
up.
I did set you up. So the idea is motivation equals, and here's the equation here. And the equation is broken down in the book. And like I said earlier, he uses people as a vehicle to make it easier to remember. We've got expectancy Eddie. And Eddie's in sales, and Eddie is a really bad time because he's got low self-confidence in himself. He doesn't expect things to work out. So when people say, no, I don't want to buy your stuff, Eddie, and he's, oh, I'm a failure. This is never going to work. And he procrastinates and he gets sacked. Right? That's Eddie. Spoilers. Sorry. You'll get it when you get through it. And then we have V for value. So we have Valerie value, or Valerie, or value Valerie, whichever way around you want it. And the thing is about Valerie, she's a writer, and what she writes, she has to feel it's of value. So when she gets asked to write this report, it's not really, she doesn't think there's any value in it. She just delays it, and then that has bad outcomes in the end. Yeah. And this idea that procrastination is something we put off against our best interests. We're basically acting against our best interests when we procrastinate. And that's the kind of core concept in the book. And so what you'll find is, if your expectancy is low and you don't see any value, you are going to procrastinate. Now, just think of this in your own world. However, if your expectancy is high, you go, you know what? I know I can get this done. I know I can do this. And value in it, your motivation always goes up. Later on, when you think about the behavior model, fog behavior model, you map these kind of two things together, the world gets interesting, if not a little complex initially. If you look at underneath the line, we have the biggest culprit, which is impulsiveness. Now, this is impulsive Tommy or impulsive Tom. Now, the thing is with Tom is that I think the story in the book is that he's going on holiday. He waits the last minute. He ends up in a crap hotel. Everything goes wrong because he left it all at the last minute. But the problem with Tom is that his expectancy is high. He's actually overconfident. He believes things are going to be great. He sees the value in stuff, but he's impulsive. So what Tom looks for is more instant gratification. And he's very sensitive to delay, which means that, and think about this for yourself, if something's far out in the future, you're not going to be motivated. Your motivation is going to be low. If you're impulsive about doing something right now, writing that book is not going to motivate you. In terms of, let's say, profiles, when you think about expectancy, when you think about value, you think about impulsiveness, which one do you feel you fall into, if any of them? Because maybe you're not a procrastinator, right? So expectancy is about maybe you see the worst rather than the best. Value is about, can you see the value in the stuff that doesn't seem important? And impulsiveness is, do you go for the more, you're probably very last minute with things on this, and you're probably a bit more impulsive. So you'd rather do the thing that gives you pleasure now than the other thing that might not. Okay, it's the second memorization we're going to do. And again, we're just going to start with pictures. So all you're going to do is imagine what I say to you in your mind as clear as you can. You're going to just see it in your head. Don't try and remember it, but don't write it down. All right. Just see it in your head. Imagine it happening. And then we'll see if you remember the pictures. So you can see my cursor, hopefully, on the sign where it's essentially going parking and when you can park. Imagine there is a spiral going upwards sign. There's a big spiral. See that spiral? Maybe you can make it gold or silver. Choose a color that you fancy. Next, on the motorcycle, there is a victory cup. There is a victory cup on the motorcycle, a big victory cup on the motorcycle. Boom. There it is. Soho Square here, right in the middle of the street, there is a very large wishing well. There's a very large wishing well. So you want to throw your coins into that to get a wish, to fulfill your wishes. Next, down this street, don't know what street this is, but across this street, right across the street is, what do we see there? We see a plan. Yes, we see a plan. But this plan, it doesn't look good. It looks like things are going to turn out for the worst. All you can do is hope for the best. So on this plan, maybe it's a map there, it's a plan of what you're going to do, and you can see all these things that could go wrong. So all you can do is hope for the best. Next, in the corner, see where these pillars are, these 4 pillars and this door over here. Imagine, this is not a pleasant picture, but imagine there's an addict. There's an addict sitting in the corner there, and they're holding a clock. And they're just trying to delay the inevitable, whatever that is for them. So you got an addict with a clock delaying. That's our first section. Next, imagine just behind the Steelcraft UK Limited van, where the blue door is, you have a board game. Maybe it's Monopoly, a very large version of Monopoly there, and you have water flowing out of the Monopoly board. Very strange picture, soak in the van. Let's move along to the next door, number 35, the wooden door here. And number 35, the wooden door, there is a large battery. And the battery is electric. It's got lots of energy and it's electrifying the whole building. A battery electrifying the whole building. I don't know why I make myself laugh. On the cousin's van, there is an eyeball. It's just an eyeball. And there's someone washing the van. There's an eyeball. Yeah, he's trying to avoid the eye in some way. They're washing the van, but there's an eyeball on the van. And then in the middle of the street here is a gigantic roulette table. And you're there and you've got your chips and you go there, double or nothing. So you double or nothing, you're throwing your chips onto the roulette wheel. Not onto the wheel, but you're betting them. There you go. You got a roulette wheel there. Next, just underneath this tree, there's a big passion fruit, a gigantic passion fruit just hanging from the tree under all those birds there, passion fruit. Next, over here, can you see where all the chairs are? All the chairs are here. Let me zoom in a little bit, actually. There we go. All the chairs right in the middle here. There is a gigantic sailboat. And I don't know if you can create a picture of Ulysses, but Ulysses, the story of the sirens and how they tried to sing, and he had wax in his ears and they tied him to the mast. You can see Ulysses bonded to the boat. He's all tied up and the sirens singing everywhere and he's on that boat. It's a very strange image, a bit colorful. Come back here. On the fence, don't think of a pink elephant, but do think of a pink elephant. Imagine a pink elephant on the fence. There's a big pink elephant on the fence. And then finally, on this parking space here, you can see lots of steps leading towards a goalpost. So lots of steps leading towards a goalpost. A quick review. I'll do this a lot quicker this time. So on the post, you have spirals. On the motorcycle, you have a victory cup. In the middle of the street here, you have a wishing well. And down that street, you have a big plan. And all the worst things are going to happen there, but you hope for the best. In the corner beside the pillars, you have an addict who is just delaying. He's holding a clock there. And then on the building behind the Steelcraft fan, you have a Monopoly with water flowing out of it. And then on the brown door, you have an electric battery electrifying the building. On the cousin's van, you have an eyeball in the wash in the van. On the middle of the street, you have a roulette table. Under the tree, you have a big passion fruit. Over beside all the seats, you have Ulysses on the sail ship. He's tied to the mast. The sirens are singing off everywhere. Down on the fence, you have a massive pink elephant. And then in the parking space, you have lots of steps heading towards a goalpost. Okay, write down. I'll point to each one. I'll give you a couple of seconds in between each one. You're going to write down what images you see. Let's see how you do. That's probably took about 5 minutes to do that. So first one, what do you see in the post? Write it down for yourself. Next, what do you see on the motorcycle? Next, what do you see in the middle of the street here, just in Soho Square? What do you see in Soho Square? Next, down the street over there, what do you see? Going right across that street, across the two buildings, what do you see? What do you see in that door where the pillars are? Who is there? What are they doing? This is right in the corner. Let me zoom in. Oh, let me zoom in a bit. So it's this one here. This door here. Who do you see there? What is happening? Next, behind the steel craft. Oh, sorry, that's my mouse. Behind the steel craft van, what do you see on the blue door in the building? What is happening there? What's the picture that you can see? Write that down. Next, the brown door. See if you can remember this one. Sometimes a little tricky, this one. What do you see in the brown door? What is happening? What is outside there? What is happening to the building? Write down what you can see. Next, the cousin's van. What is happening on the cousin's van? Don't know why this makes me smile. It just does. It's a weird picture. And then what do you see in the middle of the street? What can you see right in the middle of the street there? Nearly there, under the tree. There's something under the tree. What is it? It's underneath all the birds there. And then the seats in the distance. What can you see there? Can you remember what this one is? Slightly more complex image. What do you observe? What can you remember? What pops into your head? And then 2 more to go. What is on the fence? This is usually an easier one, but you never know. What can you see on the fence? And then finally, in the parking space, what's in the parking space? Okay, well done if you got all of those, because second memorization, usually a lot harder, bit more effort. In the chat, write down how many you have written down. There should be 13. And so as a primer, I'm just going to share very quickly the idea of each of these techniques. And what you'll discover, if we go back here, the techniques start on optimizing optimism. And so the first 5 techniques are about expectancy. The next, let's see where we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the next 5 are on love it or leave it. And the last 3 are on in good time. And they talk to expectancy, value, and impulsiveness. So if I go back here, we start off. Someone tell me, what do you see? What's the first picture?
Spiral.
Yeah, spirals. So this is a technique for expectancy, the first 5 techniques. So if you find that you tend to you find it hard to see things working out, then these 5 techniques can be useful to you. And the consequence of that is going to help you when it comes to procrastination. So these are called success spirals. And it's not rocket science. The idea is, listen, what you want to give yourself is more confidence. So in order to do that, rather than biting off a big chunk of something, you bite off a very tiny chunk of something. And you give yourself a mini success. You could see how tiny habits could be useful here, right? And there's other ways to do it. But what's the smallest thing you could do to give yourself a success? If you want to start working out and you're not working out, maybe just going for a walk around the block is where you start. Keep it simple. Don't go, I'm going to go full out, and then it doesn't happen. So you're looking for the smaller things. But it's a success spiral because it spirals upwards. You stack the successes on top of each other. Because as a procrastinator, you tend to focus on what's not working rather than what is working, unless you're an overconfident procrastinator. Then you do the other thing. But most, you probably go the other way. So that's the technique. It's super simple. What's the success spiral? What's the little things you can do that just, as you stack them up, you spiral your way towards success? Next, it says vicarious victories. And so this is all really about, so you can see the victory cup. Vicarious victories is the technique. And this is about inspiring yourself or modeling yourself. So this is a technique I've used for many years. Whenever I want to go into something new, I'll find someone who does it really well and I'll model them. What are they doing? How are they doing it? I remember when I watched Ian McKellen, I was in the same show. When you watch him work, after you leave that show, your acting is 10 times better because you've been able to model someone who is just a master at what they do. And you go, wow, okay, that's genius. How did he do that? But this is about either watching something that inspires you. seeing someone who comes from your background, been in your journey, and then they've succeeded. How have they got there? So you're wanting to inspire yourself in some way. But what we're really doing here, we're creating good pictures in our head. And when we create good pictures in our head, we start to think about the future differently. Then, and all of these techniques talk to that idea. The wishing well, is about wish fulfillment. And there's a technique here that I actually used this technique. There was a technique called the Silva method back in the 90s. I remember doing this thing, but they used a thing called mental contrasting. And this is a technique, there's lots of research around it, where essentially rather, and this is what we do in Prime Focus, by the way, even though I don't call it out, you look at the future, you create the future memory of how you want it to be, and you also understand where you are today, the reality of it. And then what you're doing is you're focusing on the gap. And then by mentally contrasting these two things together, you start to get a sense of the possibility of achieving what you want to achieve. So mental contrasting. So rather than just seeing the bad picture happening, rather than just seeing the good picture, you're playing these things out together. Things feel more achievable. Related to that is the map. And this is expect the worst, hope for the best. So expect the worst, but hope for the best. If I'd use a different word instead of hope, I'd probably go stronger than that. But this idea is bringing some realism if you're overconfident, which based on what I just said, that probably says something about how I approach things. But it's understanding that things are going to go wrong, being aware of them, and not then beating yourself up if you don't achieve what you want to achieve, because this can happen if you're a procrastinator. You can end up beating yourself up with a metaphorical stick. The next one's interesting. The title of it is something like, accept you're an addict and you're going to delay things. What this really is about, when I read through it, my take on this at least anyway, it's about being more mindful. It's about accepting sometimes you have a bad day. So don't force it. Don't beat yourself up. I've had a bad day. Things have not worked out today. You know what? I'll start tomorrow. That's not procrastination. That's me making a decision, or you making a decision. You go, you know what? This has not worked out. And I'm not going to lose the whole thing. I won't drop into a downward spiral. Tomorrow, I'll look at what I can do to move myself forward. So all of those first 5 things talk to expectancy, shifting your mind from, and this is optimizing optimism when you think of the stage door, and these are the 5 techniques you use to deal with that. And that's going to help you go from low confidence to a higher level of confidence. Because when you're confident, when you're optimistic, and we talk about this a lot, you're in that solution mode. And that's what you're shifting from, with a sense of reality. Value. So this is when you're outside the coffee shop, Little Italy, and it's love it or leave it. That there's a whole set of strategies that talk to love it or leave it. And this is about, in the procrastination equation, playing with the levers of value. And this one you will immediately recognize, because we talk about this one a lot, and it's flow. So he talks about games and goals. But what he really pulls out is all the research on flow. High E except the high E. When you're in that sense of flow, anyone remember the 3 questions that you ask yourself? How do you get into flow? What are the things you need to do to get into flow? Anyone remember that?
An anchor.
Yeah, anchoring it is a useful thing once you're in flow. Then it'll make it easier to come back. So 3 questions. First question, what do I want? So you get clear on what you want. Second question, why do I want it? Third question, you play with the levers of challenge. If something is boring, you make it harder. This is where the gaming comes in. Set a timer. If something is complex, then you make it easier. You pull it down. So if you've got a big project, to do, the question you ask yourself is, what can I do in the next 30 minutes? What will this give me? Why is that important? Because now you play with the value, and then you either make it easier or harder. When you do this, you increase the value, but also you start to believe that actually this is going to move me forward. The next thing is a tough one. And again, sometimes you just have to accept that you are where you are, particularly if your sleep's been hatched. It's a battery. It's about energy crisis. Sometimes you're knackered. When you're in that state, you're stuffed. There's only so much we can do. And sometimes we have to go, you know what, not today. I'm going to go sleep and I'm going to look after myself and spend next week just recuperating. Sometimes you need to do that. And again, it's a bit of recognition around that. And then it comes back to what are the behaviors you can optimize to really look after your health, look after your energy. I don't know if anyone remembers, but usually when I talk about the Fogg behavior model and motivation, I talk a lot about energy. It is a simple way to think about motivation. Obviously, the procrastination equation goes into a bit more detail, and that can be a nice thing to map to it as well. But you usually find when you're motivated, energy is high. When you're not, it's low. It's a clear signal about where your motivation levels are. If your energy is screwed, then it's going to be tough. So we're still on value here. The next one is, it's called, what's this technique called? It's a weird name. It's look at the thing I've just avoided. It's look at the task I just avoided. And the reason I've got someone washing up here, this is called, and this made me smile because I hadn't actually heard of the phrase before. You may have heard it before. I hadn't. It was productive procrastination. Anyone heard of that? Productive procrastination. And so the idea is really simple. You're procrastinating. So there's a little bit of acceptance here. So rather than jumping on your phone and playing Tiny Wings, why don't you go do the dishes? Do something that is a little bit valuable. So if you're going to procrastinate around something that's actually a little bit productive, that's a fun thing. I often find myself doing that sometimes at weird times. I'll just end up cleaning things, whether it's my desk or the office or something at home. Next, we have double or nothing. This is the roulette wheel, double or nothing. And this one, again, I really relate a lot to one part of Tiny Habits, which is a celebration. Procrastinators don't tend to celebrate their successes, the little successes they have along the way, even some of the big ones. And so this is about, look, reward yourself. Pay attention to the things that you get right. And again, when you do this, you start to find the value in the little things that you do. Last three, we have Ulysses. So this is now about impulsiveness. Now we get to the real juice of it. If you're an impulsive creature like me, for example, it talks about Ulysses. So this is about what are the ways that you can lessen your impulsivity. And when I think about this, when you read the book, the connections that I make in my own mind really go back to behavior design. We're all prompted through external cues, internal cues, actions that we take to do something. And again, it really mirrors this idea of remove your prompts. Tell someone that you're going to do something to keep you accountable. Burn your bridges. If you're going to give up drinking for a month, get all the drink out of the house. And so it's really looking for ways to either take the impulses out of your life or make it harder to do those things. If you want to eat more healthy before every meal, drink a couple of glasses of water, right? You might eat a little bit less. Now, or you can do the other thing. It talks about the poison, and this reminds me of a pattern interrupt where you want to give up smoking. So maybe you imagine eating the cigarette, right? Something I did in my 20s because I smoked for a while. And I just little pattern interrupt, and I did it for a week, and then I just never wanted to smoke. Still sticks in my mind. But obviously with that, you got to get creative with it. Pink elephant, right? We've all heard this one. Don't think of a pink elephant. Put a minute timer on. Don't think of a pink elephant the next minute. What happens? All you can think of is pink elephants in your head, right? Unless you change your attention. So this is about it pays to pay attention, or paying attention to something pays. And the experiment that stood out in my mind when I read this chapter was where they give pretzels to kids. And they didn't want the kids to eat the pretzels. Now, as you can imagine, if you've seen a 4-year-old, you put like they're going to want to eat the thing, right? But rather than trying to get them not to eat the pretzel, what they said is, look, what does it remind you of? The look of it. What does it look like? And the kids would say, oh, it looks like a stick. It looks like a log. Now, do you want to eat a stick? You want to eat a log? No, of course you don't, right? So now their attention wasn't focused on, a tasty, salty pretzel. It was focused on, this thing looks like a stick and it looks like a log. So now they've got a different picture in the mind. So again, if you find you're impulsive, you can change what something means to you by either an analogy, a metaphor, or thinking about it in a different way, and give your attention to that. And the final thing is all about how you frame your goals, framing your goals in the positive and take small steps towards your goals, linked with the spirals of success spirals. But actually, when you think about what we do in Prime Focus, this is what we do. What's the 3-month thing that you want to achieve? Frame it in the positive, be able to measure it every single week. What do you want to achieve next week? Let's make this real. Let's make it now. Every single day, what is today about? Because when you start to create those habits, you start to get these small wins. You start to, if you celebrate those successes, that impacts your expectancy and your confidence. You start to get more value in things. You start to, if you use some of the other techniques, you start to be able to control some of that impulsiveness. So now what's going to happen when you read this book? And actually, I've pretty much told you everything that's in the book, right? But I would suggest to read it because you will gain your own insights. But as you read it, think about the 2 memory palaces that we went through. Put yourself in Soho. Read that first chapter. There might be a few more pictures that pop in your head. Feel free to sprinkle them down in that portrait. You read through the Einstein chapter. Think about your own life, because there might be just a memory that pops into your mind that you think about Einstein sitting there and you think about that memory, it gets connected, and you can do that for each chapter. And when you get to the techniques for how to be better and break procrastination, when you get to optimize and optimism, now you can jump back and forth to the memory palace and Soho Square. Because each one of those techniques, what I didn't go through is he gives different scenarios. Some might be like dieting, it might be at work, and how you apply each of these techniques to each one. Yeah, you do that, and then you read this, you'll make a bunch more connections. And then what you really want to do is what I've done with you today, but maybe a shorter version, where you go tell someone about the book or just talk to yourself about it. Because the fact is, here's what's happened. I verbalize all this stuff out loud. What's happening in my brain right now? I'm making a ton of connections. This becomes very hard to forget. And the gaps that you have, you then go back and you go, oh, I had a gap there. What was that about? Yeah, that was it. Now, if you want to go crazy, you can memorize all the research. But yeah, for me, that's actually quite useful. And some of it I read before and some of it I won't. And so that will add to it.